Clara Brennan sat at the rough kitchen table and counted the coins again, even though she already knew the number. $3. That was all. 3 silver dollars laid out on the worn with like a bad joke. The cabin around her felt smaller than ever. Cold air slid through the cracks in the walls and under the door. The last stick of firewood was already on the flames, making more smoke than heat. Behind her, 6 small bodies moved and shifted in the dim light of a single oil lamp. Eliza, 11 years old and trying hard to be grown, stood at the stove stirring the thinnest stew Clara had ever made, just water and a scrape of bone and a handful of old beans. "Mama," Eliza whispered, trying to sound calm, "should I add more water so it stretches?" Samuel, 9, sat near the table with his arms crossed over his empty stomach, jaw tight like a man's. "You said we have real supper soon," he said, not angry, just tired. In the corner, the twins, Rosie and Ruth, only 7, huddled under one blanket, bare toes tucked under their thin nightgowns, eyes too big in their small faces. 5-year-old Daniel lay wrapped in another blanket on a straw pallet, coughing so hard his thin chest shook, his cheeks bright red with fever. Every cough sounded like it might break him in half. Baby Maggie, barely 18 months, sat on Clara's lap, hot and fussy, chewing on her own fingers and letting out sharp little cries because her gums hurt and there was no honey left to rub on them. The cupboard stood open and almost bare. One cracked plate, one chipped cup, a small sack of flour that was more dust than food. On the front door, nailed at eye level, was the eviction notice in the landlord's neat, hard handwriting. Rent 3 days overdue. Vacate by sunrise. The words burned in Clara's mind every time she blinked. She turned her wedding ring around and around on her finger, the thin gold band loose now, because she had lost weight. It was the last thing of value she owned, but even if she sold it, it would not feed 6 children through winter. She thought for one short, horrible moment about the orphanage in town. People said children there got regular meals. They also said those places broke children's hearts. She pressed Maggie closer and pushed the thought away. They were her children. She would die before she gave them up. 3 months ago, she had still believed life, while hard, was at least steady. She had still had a husband then. Thomas Brennan had been strong and loud and sure of himself. One morning he had gone out to work with the horses behind the livery stable, and by afternoon he was lying still in a box, neck broken from a kick. The funeral had been held on a gray day that felt colder than this one. Clara had worn a borrowed black dress that didn't quite fit and pinched her under the arms. The children had stood in a row beside her, stiff and nervous in clothes that smelled of mothballs and other people's homes. The pastor had spoken kind words about a good man and a faithful worker. People from town had murmured so tragic and poor Clara and shaken their heads. A few women had hugged her, told her to come by if you need anything. But within a week, most of them had stopped stopping by. At the graveside, while the coffin was being lowered into the ground, the bank manager had come over, hat in his hands, face dry as paper. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm afraid there are some accounts we must discuss when you're able," he had said quietly. That was when she learned the truth. There were no savings put away, no small safety net. Instead, Thomas had left debts, wagers from cards and drink at the saloon, money borrowed on the promise of better days that never came. The bank wanted payment. The landlord still wanted rent. The world did not care that she was now a widow with 6 children. That day at the cemetery, when the dirt had started to hit the top of the coffin, Clara had noticed a man standing at the far edge of the crowd. He was tall, wearing a worn brown coat and a hat in his hands instead of on his head. He kept a little distance from the others. His face was lean, sun-browned, with lines of tiredness around his eyes. He did not step forward or speak, but when she looked up, their eyes met. His gaze had held hers just long enough for him to give a small, respectful nod, like a soldier greeting another soldier. Then, before she could place him or ask anyone who he was, he had turned away and walked off between the gravestones. She had been too numb to wonder much at the time. In the weeks that followed, the man faded into the background of her mind, swallowed by more pressing worries. Sewing work came and went. With 6 children, she could not sit at the machine all day. People stopped bringing shirts to mend once they realized she sometimes had to send Samuel to the door to say Mama's busy with the baby. Neighbors who had once offered a spare loaf or a side of pork now closed their doors a little faster when she walked by. Slowly, she sold what she could. First the extra chair, then the nicer quilt, then the small clock Thomas had won in a card game long ago. Now, there was nothing left to sell but her ring. Back in the present, Daniel let out another rough cough that tore through the quiet. Clara shifted Maggie to Eliza and knelt beside the boy, wiping his mouth with the corner of her apron. Her hand came away with a small smear of red. For a moment, the cabin seemed to tilt. "No," she whispered. "Oh, sweetheart, no." His eyes were glassy, his breath hot against her wrist. She would a cloth and put it on his head, but the cloth warmed in seconds. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the corners of the house. The sky had gone from gray to black. It was late. Too late to call the doctor. Not that she had money to pay him if he came. She bowed her head and prayed under her breath. Simple words, no fancy phrases. "Lord, please, please don't take him. I got nothing left to give." As she prayed, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow, solid knocks that made the lamp flame tremble. Clara froze. The landlord. Of course. Maybe he had decided not to wait until dawn. Maybe he had come to throw them out now. Tonight, with the cold already inside the house and her boy coughing up blood. Eliza's eyes went wide. The twins pulled the blanket over their heads. Samuel stood up, fists clenched, tried to look brave and looking very small. "Stay here," Clara said, though there was nowhere else for them to go. Her legs felt heavy as she stood. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the door. For 1 second, she thought about not opening it, just pretending no one was home. But the landlord knew they were there. He always knew. She lifted the latch and pulled the door open a few inches, keeping her body between the visitor and her children. Cold air rushed in, making the lamp flicker again. On the threshold stood the man from the graveyard. The same hat, though now it was on his head. The same worn coat, brushed cleaner but still road dusty. Up close, Clara could see he was not old, maybe mid-30s, but hard used by weather and work. His eyes were a soft, steady brown with a hint of sadness deep in them. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, like he had been sure he would find her here. His voice was low and calm, with a trace of the West in it. She tightened her grip on the edge of the door. "Do I know you?" He took off his hat at once, respectful. "No, ma'am. Name's Jack Dalton. I knew your husband. Long time ago." Her heart jumped in her chest at the mention of Thomas. Fear and anger rose together. Had this man come to collect some new debt? "What do you want?" she asked, hearing the sharp edge in her own voice. He didn't flinch. Behind him, in the darkness, she saw the outline of a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. The wagon was already loaded, barrels, crates, a rolled canvas, what looked like a stack of folded blankets. A lantern hung from the side, swinging a little in the wind, throwing light over the wheels. "Heard you're in trouble," Jack said simply. "I got land. 2 days west of here. House needs work, but it's solid. Big enough for all of you." He glanced past her shoulder, where Samuel stood stiff and protective, where Eliza held Maggie close, where the twins watched with wide eyes, where Daniel coughed weakly from the corner. "I don't understand," Clara said, throat dry. "I'm saying come with me," he answered. "You and the children. All 6. I'll give you shelter, food, safety." The words were too big, too strange. Her mind scrambled for the hidden trap. "Why?" she whispered. "What do you want from me?" He held her gaze for a long moment, then shook his head. "Nothing you're thinking," he said quietly. "I owe your husband a debt. He saved my life once. This is me paying it forward." Behind her, Daniel gave a rough, rattling cough that cut the air like a knife. Jack's eyes slid toward the sound at once, worry plain on his face, and something in that look did more to soften her fear than any speech could have. She noticed his hands then, rough and calloused. The hands of a man who worked with tools and earth, not soft like the bankers or smooth like the landlords. She noticed the wagon again, extra blankets folded neat, a basket with loaves of bread wrapped in cloth, the faint clink of milk in metal cans. He had not come on a wild impulse. He had planned for children, for them. Her gaze slipped to the eviction notice on the doorframe, the ink dark in the lamplight. Vacate by sunrise. Outside, winter waited. Inside, her son's breath rasped like sand. If they stayed, she knew how this ended. If they left, she had no idea what would come. She looked again at Jack Dalton. He stood still, patient, not pushing, his hat held in both hands, eyes open and honest and sad. He did not look like a savior. He looked like a tired man who had decided to do the right thing, even if it cost him. Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of 6 lives on her shoulders. Her heart pounded so loud she could almost hear it. "I'll need 10 minutes to pack," she whispered. And just like that, with those few words, she stepped out of the life she knew and chose the dark, wild road with a stranger over the slow, certain end that waited if she stayed. The dawn broke pale and cold over the Kansas plains as Clara stood by the wagon, her hands trembling as she wrapped the last blanket around Daniel. The night had been endless, packing what little they owned, soothing frightened children, feeding the feverish boys small sips of water. Now, as the first streaks of light crept across the frost-covered ground, they were ready to leave the only home they'd ever known. The neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, whispering as Jack Dalton lifted boxes and bundles into the wagon bed with quiet strength. Samuel tried to help, carrying a small sack with determined pride, while Eliza clutched baby Maggie, her thin arms stiff with mistrust. The twins clung to each other, eyes wide as if afraid the ground itself might open and swallow them. When the landlord appeared early, coat buttoned tight, lips pursed in that sour way of his, Clara felt her stomach drop. But before she could speak, Jack faced him squarely. "The lady's paid her dues with sweat," he said calmly. "She owes you nothing." The landlord's mouth worked like he wanted to argue, but one look at Jack's steady eyes and the big revolver holstered at his hip, and he backed off without another word. When Rosie dropped her rag doll in the mud, Jack stopped everything to pick it up, wiped it clean, and handed it back. "Can't leave family behind," he said, voice gentle enough to make the little girl smile. As the wagon rolled forward, Clara turned once toward the cabin. The sagging roof, the smoke-stained window, the door with its cruel notice, and then looked away. There was nothing there for them now. The road ahead stretched like a ribbon of pale gold under the morning sun, the horizon wide and endless. For a while, no one spoke. Only the creak of wagon wheels and the soft snort of horses filled the silence. Samuel finally asked, "Mama, is he going to hurt us?" The question hit her hard. She looked at Jack, who must have heard because he pulled the reins and stopped the horses. Turning around on the seat, he looked at all of them. "I know you're scared," he said. "I know I'm a stranger. But I give you my word, I'll never raise my hand to any of you. Not your mama, not you kids. Never. You're safe with me." Something in his voice, plain, steady, without a trace of pride, made even Eliza lower her guard a little. When a wheel hit a rock and cracked, Jack didn't curse. Instead, he taught Samuel how to lift and patch it, showing him every step with patience. The boy's face lit up with a shy smile of accomplishment. Later, as they stopped by a small creek for lunch, Jack knelt beside the twins and pulled 2 peppermint sticks from his pocket. "One for each," he said, eyes twinkling. Rosie hesitated, but Ruth took hers quick, and soon both were giggling, sticky-faced, and happy for the first time in months. The day grew long, and Daniel's cough worsened. By late afternoon, his small body was shaking, his breathing ragged. Panic clawed at Clara's chest. She held him close, whispering his name, but Jack was already there, calm and sure. "We'll stop here," he said, steering the wagon off the road near a stream. From his pack, he pulled dried willow bark and brewed a bitter tea, coaxing Daniel to sip it. He cooled the boy's forehead with river water and held him close, humming an old trail song in a low voice that made the air feel softer. Clara watched from the shadows of the firelight, her heart breaking and healing all at once. "You've done this before," she murmured. Jack's eyes flickered with pain. "Had a son once," he said. "Fever took him. Long time ago." He didn't say more, and she didn't ask. That night, as the fire burned low, Jack made beans and bacon, fed the children, and fixed the horses. By the time the stars filled the sky, the little camp felt almost peaceful. Samuel asked questions about cowboys and cattle drives, and Jack answered each one with patience, spinning light stories about wild horses and sunsets, so wide they could swallow a manhole. The twins fell asleep mid-laughter, leaning against his arm. Eliza stayed awake longer, still cautious, but the edge of fear in her eyes had softened into curiosity. Before Clara could thank him, thunder rumbled far off. By dawn, the sky had turned the color of slate. "We need to move," Jack said, tightening the reins. The storm came fast, rain like needles, wind that cut through cloth and bone. The wagon skidded and jolted as lightning split the horizon. Maggie screamed. The twins cried. Samuel tried to help but slipped in the mud. "Hold tight," Jack shouted. When the wheels stuck deep, he jumped down without hesitation, unhitched the horses, and lifted the children one by one through the downpour to a rocky ledge nearby. Clara protested, but he ignored the pain in his shoulder as he carried Daniel last, wrapped in his own coat. Then he went back, again and again, until every bundle and blanket was safe beneath the overhang. By the time he returned the last time, soaked through, he was shaking with cold but still moving with purpose. He built a fire from damp wood using oil from his pack, his hands steady even as the rain poured. He stripped off his wet outer coat, keeping his shirt on, and wrapped the shivering children in dry blankets he had stored in a waterproof roll. Daniel's fever rose again. His breathing came fast and shallow. Claire wanted to scream. "He's dying," she whispered. "He's not," Jack said simply, holding the boy to his chest for warmth, walking back and forth, humming that same low tune. "Not while I'm here." The others huddled close, wide-eyed and trembling, but the calm in Jack's voice worked like medicine. He told a story about a family who crossed mountains through storms worse than this, making it up as he went, his tone slow and steady until even the thunder seemed to fade. When at last the rain eased, the children slept in a pile of blankets, their breathing slow and even. Jack sat by the fire, his face half in shadow. Clara moved closer. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. He poked the embers, eyes distant. "Your husband saved my life once. Mining accident years ago. He pulled me out when the shaft collapsed. We were young, before he changed. When I heard he died and left you with 6 little ones, I figured I owed him, and maybe I owed the good part of myself too." She studied him in silence. "That's all?" she asked quietly. He gave a small, tired smile. "I won't lie. I'm lonely. Been alone 5 years since I lost my family. But I'm not asking anything of you, just offering what I got." Clara looked at him across the dim fire, his face lined with grief but soft with kindness. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear, a small, fragile thread of trust. Outside, the storm passed, and in its wake, a strange peace settled around them, as if the prairie itself had decided to give them another chance. By the third afternoon on the trail, the sky had cleared and the land began to change. The flat, tired field around town gave way to low hills and a wide valley opening up like a promise. When Jack finally pulled the wagon off the main road and followed a narrow track toward the river, Clara felt her chest tighten with a strange mix of fear and hope. The first glimpse of his land took her breath for a moment. A slow, shining river cutting through the valley, cottonwoods along the bank, a rough but solid log cabin sitting on a rise, a barn a little crooked but standing, a broken chicken coop, and wide, open fields waiting for seed. Mountains sat blue and quiet in the distance, watching over everything. "This is it," Jack said simply. Samuel leaned forward, eyes wide. "Mama, look, fish!" he shouted, spotting silver shapes near the riverbank. The twins tumbled out of the wagon as soon as it stopped, grabbing at wildflowers and weaving quick crowns. Their laughter carried on the breeze. Even sickly Daniel seemed to breathe easier, filling his lungs with clean air and looking around with tired wonder. Eliza stayed close to Clara, still cautious, but when she whispered, "It's pretty, Mama," there was no denying the spark in her eyes. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old wood, but the walls were tight, the floor strong, the stone fireplace big enough to heat the whole place. There were 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above, and in one of the rooms, Clara found a freshly stuffed mattress with quilts spread out, the sheets clean, the floor swept. Someone had made it ready. "Big rooms for you and the girls, if you want," Jack said, standing in the doorway, but not stepping in. "Boys could take the loft with me, or we can do it another way. I'll sleep in the barn till you're comfortable." She turned in a slow circle, taking in the 7 chairs around the table. 7, not 6, all newly carved. On the shelf were small tin cups in different sizes, some clearly meant for little hands. A sack of flour, jars of beans, salt, dried apples, and a side of pork hung by the back door. He had spent time and money preparing this place, not just for himself, but for them. On a high shelf, she saw a faded rag doll sitting alone, and for a moment wondered if it had belonged to the son he had lost. That first night, after the wagon was unloaded and the children fed real bread and meat for the first time in weeks, Clara lay awake listening to new sounds. The steady rush of the river, the creak of its settling, the low murmur of Jack's voice in the barn as he talked to the horses like they were old friends. Morning came early. When she stepped outside, he was already up, chopping wood with his sleeves rolled up, breath fogging in the chill air. Over breakfast, with children half asleep around the table, Clara finally spoke words that had been pressing on her chest. "Jack, we need to talk," she said quietly. His eyes met hers at once. "All right." Her fingers wrapped around her cup. "What do you want from me?" "From us." He set his fork down, thinking a moment. "I want help building this place into something that'll last," he said slowly. "I want your children to grow up safe. I want honest work and honest company. That's all." Her face tightened. "You don't expect." "I'm not." She couldn't finish the sentence. He shook his head. "I'm not looking for a wife, if that's what you're asking," he said, voice steady. "I'm looking for a partner to keep this land alive. You want to stay, you stay. Come spring, if you want to leave, I'll hitch up the team and take you wherever you choose. No strings." The words "no strings" settled over her like a warm blanket. Choice. It was something she had not had in a long time. The days fell into a rhythm quicker than she expected. Jack rose before dawn to tend the animals and check fences. Samuel followed him like a small shadow, learning how to milk the cow Jack had brought in a separate deal, how to pitch hay, how to mend a broken board instead of just leaning against it and complaining. In the kitchen, Eliza helped Clara organize the shelves, plan meals, bake bread from the fresh flour, and wash clothes by the river. She still watched Jack carefully whenever he came in, but there was less fear and more quiet study in her gaze now. Jack patched up the chicken coop and came back from town with 6 hens and a rooster. The twins took over at once, naming each chicken as if they were precious dolls. Rosie's favorite was Honey, Ruth's was Biscuit. Every afternoon, they pranced back to the house proud as queens with eggs in their little aprons. Daniel, his color returning thanks to rest and food, trailed after Jack as much as his strength allowed, carrying small pieces of wood or holding tools Jack put in his hands just to make him feel useful. Jack never rushed him, never laughed when he tired quickly. Baby Maggie, now crawling fast, seemed to know no fear around him. She would tug on his pant leg until he scooped her up and he'd carve her a smooth wooden teething ring that she chewed on happily instead of her fingers. Evenings became their softest time. After supper, they gathered around the fireplace. Jack sat in his chair with his carving knife, making small things from leftover wood, whistles and toy horses, a comb for Eliza, a small wagon for Daniel. The children crowded close to watch the shapes appear. Clara mended clothes by the light of the lamp, her hands busy but her heart oddly calm. One night, as she patched a rip in his shirt, she noticed an old bullet scar near his shoulder, pale against his skin. He did not offer the story, and she did not push, but the sight reminded her he'd seen more than just card tables and cattle. At the end of the first week, she realized with surprise that she had slept through the night more than once without waking in panic. The second week, Jack took a rifle down from its place on the wall and brought it outside. "Out here, you need to protect yourself and the kids," he told her. His tone held no drama, just plain truth. He showed her how to stand, how to hold the gun, how to line up a shot. When he stepped behind her to guide her arms, her hands started to shake, old memories of Thomas angry and drunk with a gun flashing behind her eyes. Jack felt her tense and immediately stepped back. "I'll never point this at you or the children," he said firmly. "This is for coyotes and snakes and anything else that thinks this place is easy pickings. That's all." His words steadied her. She took a breath, lifted the rifle again, and when she finally squeezed the trigger, the tin can on the fence post jumped. The children cheered, and Jack grinned, a wide, rare smile that made him look years younger. That afternoon, sitting at the table while Maggie napped and the others played outside, Clara told him the truth about Thomas. The gambling, the drinking, the way his voice could fill a room with fear even though he had never laid a hand on her. Jack didn't defend him, didn't speak ill of the dead either. He just listened, quiet and steady, then finally said, "You survived all that. That takes strength. Your children are good because you're good." Something inside her cracked at those words. Tears spilled down her cheeks, the first she had let fall in months. He handed her a clean handkerchief and didn't try to stop her or fix her. He simply sat there, a solid presence, while she let it all go. Later, Samuel cornered Jack by the barn, his small face serious. "Are you going to marry our mama?" he asked bluntly. Jack's eyes softened. "That's not why I brought you here," he said. "Your mama deserves to choose what she wants, not get pushed into something because she's scared." It was an answer Samuel didn't fully understand, but he heard the respect in it. Eliza, watching from a distance, heard enough to change something in her too. The next day, she came to Jack on her own. "Will you teach me to ride proper?" she asked, chin lifted. "Not just sit in the wagon." His smile was gentle. "I'd be honored," he said, giving her the quiet dignity of a grown-up answer. The twins were soon climbing on him like a climbing tree, squealing with delight when he pretended to be a growling bear. Daniel refused to go to sleep unless Jack came in to tuck him in and tell a story about a brave boy who faced storms and sickness and still kept going. "Was that you?" Daniel once asked, eyes wide. Jack brushed a hand over the boy's hair. "No," he said softly. "That's you, partner." And somewhere between those long days and warm, firelit nights, the word stranger stopped fitting him at all. For weeks, life on the homestead had begun to feel like a fragile miracle, too quiet, too beautiful to be real. The mornings were full of laughter and chores, the children's bare feet thudding across the porch while Clara's voice carried from the kitchen, humming soft hymns as a smell of cornbread filled the air. Jack taught Samuel how to saddle a horse. Eliza helped Clara hang laundry. The twins chased chickens, and Daniel's laughter, once lost to sickness, rang out again. One afternoon, Clara stood on the porch watching Jack carry Maggie on his shoulders, the twins hanging from his arms. The boy's face lit with the easy joy of a man rediscovering what family meant. For the first time in months, Clara's chest didn't ache with fear. "Mr. Jack, can we stay forever?" Samuel asked, his voice half hope, half challenge. Jack's eyes met Clara's across the yard. "That's up to your mama, but I surely hope so." That night, after the children slept, They sat side by side on the porch. The stars glowed white against the dark sweep of the prairie sky. Their hands brushed once, electric, tentative, and for a moment, Clara thought maybe peace had found them for good. Then Jack stiffened, eyes narrowing toward the road. "Riders coming," he said quietly. "Get the children inside." 3 men appeared through the dusk, horses snorting steam into the cool evening air. The leader was Garrett Voss, a man with slicked hair, a polished coat, and eyes like whetstone. His smirk carried trouble. He swung off his horse with lazy arrogance, boots crunching gravel. "Jack Dalton," he drawled. "Been looking for you. Heard you were playing family man out here." Jack stepped forward, steady and cold. "State your business." "Business, sure. The $500 you owe me from that little game in Dodge." "I don't owe you anything," Jack said. "That game was crooked." Voss smiled thinly. "Judge won't see it that way. I've got papers. Witnessed and signed." His gaze slid past Jack to Clara, standing on the porch clutching Maggie, the children peeking from behind her skirts. "Didn't know you had yourself a woman. And all these little ones, quite the setup." His tone turned oily. "A woman like that could work off a debt in town if you can't pay." Jack moved like a whip crack, placing himself between Voss and Clara, voice low and deadly. "You'll speak to her with respect, or not at all." Clara found her voice, heart pounding. "State your business proper or leave." Voss chuckled. "She's got fire. I like that." He tugged on his gloves. 2 weeks, Dalton. $500. Or I take the land. Papers are legal. And maybe I take something else while I'm at it." He turned his horse with a jerk, the other men circling the property like wolves before riding off, leaving the sound of their laughter hanging like smoke. Inside, Daniel cried. Maggie wailed. The twins clung to Clara's skirts, and Eliza locked the door though the latch trembled in her hand. Clara rounded on Jack. "You said we were safe here. You brought us into danger." Jack's face was a storm. "I know. I thought I'd left it behind. I'll fix this." "Who is he?" "A man I beat once at cards, years ago. He cheated. I called him out. He swore revenge. After my family died, I didn't care if he came for me. But then I met you." His voice cracked. "He wants the land more than the money. He'll use the law to steal it." Clara's fury turned to dread. "We can't stay. Not if he comes back. My children, then I'll sign the land over to him," Jack said, defeated. "He can have it. You'll be safe. And you?" she whispered. He looked away. "Doesn't matter. I was supposed to be dead 5 years ago." Clara saw it then. The hollowness behind his kindness, the grief that never healed. He'd save them, yes, but maybe he'd been hoping they'd save him too. That night, the fire burned low, the children asleep, Clara lying awake staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Voss's sneer, heard his threat, and then Jack's broken voice saying he'd give everything away to keep them safe. He was a man willing to die for them, but not to live for himself. She turned her head and saw him outside through the window, sitting alone on the porch with his hat in his hands, staring out into the dark. It hit her then, not gratitude, not obligation, but love. Fierce, terrifying, bone-deep love. She realized he wasn't just the man who'd rescued them. He was the man who made her feel strong again. And she knew if Voss came back, she wouldn't run. Not this time. She'd stand beside Jack, come what may. By dawn, resolve had replaced fear. Clara rose early, her mind made up. If Voss thought she'd cower, he was wrong. Jack tried to stop her when she saddled the horse, but her eyes, clear, determined, silenced him. "You gave us life, Jack," she said. "Now I'll fight to keep it." In town, she sold her wedding ring for $75 after bargaining the jeweler up from $50, then found the storekeeper who remembered Jack from before. When he heard Voss's name, his expression turned grim. "That snake's been swindling folks up and down this county," he said. But no one's had the guts to stand against him. Word spread fast. By the time she and Jack left town, they had allies. Men and women who'd once been afraid to speak now offering quiet support. The circuit judge was due in 2 weeks. If they could hold on till then, the truth might win. Back at the homestead, they prepared. Jack taught Clara and Eliza to handle a rifle with steady hands, while Samuel built hiding spots for the twins and Daniel under the floorboards. Neighbors began riding by to check on the fence line, bringing news, supplies, and silent solidarity. Each night, Clara sat by the fire watching Jack sharpen his knife, his expression carved in stone. "We'll make it," she'd whisper. "We have to." Days passed, tension coiling tighter until one evening when the wind smelled like rain and trouble. 4 riders appeared, Voss and 3 new thugs. Jack was in the barn. Clara was alone on the porch with the children inside. "Where's Dalton?" Voss called, dismounting with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Not here," Clara said, leveling the rifle Jack had taught her to use. "And you're trespassing." "Feisty little thing," Voss sneered. "Maybe we'll take you instead." She cocked the hammer. "My children are watching. You touch me, they'll remember your face, and so will the judge in 6 days." Voss's smirk faltered, but he bluffed. "Judge ain't coming. Storm washed the road out north." "Then you'd best start praying I believe you," she said coldly. A shadow moved behind Voss. "Jack, shotgun steady. She told you to leave." The standoff froze time. The goons shifted, hands hovering near guns. From the doorway, Samuel appeared with a pitchfork, Eliza clutching a cast-iron pan, the twins clutching stones with trembling fists. "Go back inside," Jack ordered, voice low. "No," Samuel said, jaw set. "We're not leaving you." For a heartbeat, Voss laughed. Then the sound of hooves thundered from a ridge. 8 riders approached, neighbors from town, the storekeeper, the blacksmith, the schoolteacher, and others, all armed, all grim. "Morning, Voss," the storekeeper called. "Funny seeing you here after spreading lies. We figured we'd stop by and watch, make sure the Dalton place stays safe." Voss turned pale beneath his tan. "You folks think you can stand against the law?" The blacksmith spat. "We are the law when the law's late. You make a move, and we'll all swear you try to steal land and threaten a widow. That's a hanging crime in this territory." The air crackled with silence until Voss, jaw tight, spat in the dirt. "This ain't over," he growled, swinging into his saddle. "It is," Jack said, eyes steady. "You just don't know it yet." Voss and his men rode off under the watchful eyes of a dozen barrels. That night, peace returned like a blessing. Clara wept quietly in relief while Jack sat beside her, hand over hers. "You were brave today," he said. "You taught me to be," she replied. A week later, the judge arrived as planned, the town hall packed. Jack told his story plainly. How he'd been framed, how Voss forged witnesses. Clara spoke next, her voice shaking but strong, describing the man Jack was, the one who'd saved 6 children and a dying boy. The judge watched the children sitting in the front row, clean and healthy, and his stern expression softened. When Voss produced his so-called IOU, the court clerk frowned. The witnesses' names were fakes. One by one, townsfolk stood up to testify against Voss's fraud. The evidence stacked until the judge finally rapped his gavel. "The claim is void. Jack Dalton owes no debt. Mr. Voss, you'll pay court costs and a fine for perjury. Any further harassment of this family will bring criminal charges." The courtroom erupted in applause. Jack's shoulders sagged with quiet relief. Clara reached for his hand, gripping it tight. For the first time since the night she'd met him, he smiled like a man who finally believed he deserved to live. Outside, the children ran ahead, laughing in the sun, the sound of their joy echoing across the street. When a judge asked if they were married, Clara met Jack's gaze and said softly, "Not yet, but soon." That night, after the judge's verdict and the long ride home, the sky over the homestead blazed with stars, clear and cold and bright as hammered silver. The children, worn out from the excitement and sugar cookies offered by half the town, tumbled into bed in a tangle of limbs and sleepy giggles, and the house slowly quieted. Clara, tucked in Rosie and Ruth, kissed Daniel's forehead, fixed Eliza's braid with gentle fingers, and lifted a drowsy Maggie from where she'd fallen asleep with her fist tucked under her chin. Jack moved through the rooms with an ease that no longer surprised her, blowing out lamps, straightening boots by the door, checking the lock with a protective touch more habit than fear. When at last the children were settled, their soft breathing a steady chorus in the background, Clara stepped onto the porch and found Jack already there, leaning against the railing, hat in his hands, the moonlight turning his profile to clean lines and shadows. For once, there was no weight of disaster pressing down on them. No landlord, no sickness, no Voss. Just the soft chorus of crickets, the low murmur of the river, and the knowledge that this land, this house, this fragile little world they'd built together was truly, legally theirs. Jack glanced sideways when she joined him, the corner of his mouth lifting. "I told the judge I'd put your name on the deed," he said quietly. "Amend it. I'll have it split tomorrow if you'd like. Half yours, half mine. Partners." Clara studied his face, the scar along his jaw, the lines at the corners of his eyes that came from squinting in his sun and wind, not from frowning. "Is that all you want, Jack?" she asked softly. "A partnership on paper?" He looked up sharply, as if afraid he'd overstepped, that she'd heard obligation where he'd meant honor. "If that's what you want, Clara, it's enough," he said. "You've had enough men deciding your life for you." She shook her head slowly, feeling something loosen inside her. "I know what I don't want," she said. "I don't want to be owned. I don't want to be charity. I don't want to be someone a man feels sorry for." He flinched. "That's not, I know," she cut in gently. "Let me finish. I know what I do want. I want someone who sees me as equal. Someone who looks at my children and doesn't just tolerate them, but loves them. Someone who teaches my son how to be a good man and shows my daughters what kindness looks like. Someone who makes me feel safe without making me feel small. That's what I want, Jack Dalton. And whether you meant to or not, that's who you've been." He swallowed, throat tight, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "Clara, I came for you because I owed your husband my life, or that's what I told myself," he said. "Truth is, when I heard about you, young widow, 6 kids, no one to stand for you, it felt like God was giving me one last chance to be useful. I thought maybe I could pay off a debt and then drift on someplace where no one knew my name. But somewhere between that first night on the trail and your boy calling me Mr. Jack like I was something solid, it changed. I didn't know it would become love, but it has. I love you, Clara, and I love those 6 children like they were flesh of my flesh." Her breath caught at the rawness in his tone. "Then ask me properly," she whispered. He took a steadying breath, turned to face her fully, and for the first time since she'd known him, Jack Dalton looked almost shy. "Clara Brennan," he began, voice soft but sure, "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I'm rough around the edges. I've got scars you can see and more you can't. But I can promise this. I'll get up every day and work to be worthy of the trust you've given me. I'll never raise a hand in anger. I'll never walk away from you or the children when things get hard. I don't want to be the man who saved you. I want to be the man who walks beside you. Equal. Partner. Heart to heart. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision, but her smile was bright as sunrise. "Jack Dalton," she said, voice trembling with joy, "I left with you because I was desperate. I stayed because you were kind. I'm saying yes because I love you. So yes, 1,000 times yes." His laugh broke free, startled and disbelieving and full of wonder. And then he was pulling her into his arms, his hands gentle at her waist, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like Thomas's had ever been. No demand, no claim, just warmth and promise and the sweet ache of being wanted for exactly who she was. Behind the curtain of the bedroom window, for sets of eyes and one sleepy toddler peeked out, Samuel punched the air in triumph, whispering, "Told you he'd marry Mama," while Eliza rolled her eyes and hushed him, though she couldn't stop smiling either. The wedding came 6 months later, on a spring morning when wildflowers painted the fields in purple and gold. The little white church in town had never been so full. Women who'd once whispered pity now smiled genuine smiles. Men who'd once only nodded now clapped Jack on the shoulder like a brother. Samuel wore a proper suit, the sleeves only slightly too short, and stood tall at Jack's side. Eliza, in a pale yellow dress, helped arrange her mother's veil with careful hands. Rosie and Ruth scattered petals down the aisle in matching pink dresses, arguing cheerfully over whose basket was emptier. Daniel, sturdy and bright-eyed, carried the ring tied with blue ribbon, walking solemnly until he caught Jack's eye and broke into a grin. Maggie, now a sturdy toddler, clapped and squealed whenever the organ played, insisting on being held first by Clara, then by Jack, then by anyone who would fuss over her. When Clara stepped into the doorway of the church, the room fell silent. She wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes shine, the fabric a gift from half a dozen women who'd each donated scrap. Her hair was swept up with wildflower Samuel and the twins had gathered that morning. She walked down the aisle, not like a woman being given away, but like a woman walking toward a choice she'd made freely. Jack's breath hitched when he saw her, his hand tightening on the back of the pew until his knuckles went white. "You look," he began when she reached him, but words failed him and he just shook his head, smiling like a man who'd stumbled into heaven. The preacher spoke of second chances and chosen family, of how love was more than feeling. It was daily bread and shared burdens and choosing each other over and over again. When it came time for vows, Jack went first. "I promise I will never raise my hand in anger," he said, voice clear. "I promise I'll stand beside you when the storms come, and not just when the sun is out. I'll listen when you speak. I'll honor your voice. I'll work this land with you and for you and these children as long as I draw breath." Clara's eyes shimmered. "I promise I'll build this life with you," she answered. "I'll trust you with my heart and my children, not as a man who saved us, but as the man who belongs with us. I'll tell you the truth, even when it's hard. I'll stand beside you, not behind, not in front. Beside." Then the preacher did something no one expected. He turned to the children. "Do you take this man to be part of your family?" he asked gently. Samuel gulped, chest puffing with importance. "I do," he said, voice wobbling only a little. Eliza nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "I do." Rosie and Ruth chimed in together. "We do." Daniel, eyes shining, whispered, "I do. He saved my life." Maggie, not understanding but sensing the joy in the room, crowed, "Dada," and everyone laughed through their tears. Clara was the one who leaned in first for the kiss, her hands on either side of Jack's face, claiming him in front of everyone as her equal, her partner, her chosen love. The cheers that followed shook the rafters. 1 year later, the homestead did not look like the same place where a desperate widow had once arrived with 6 frightened children. The fields were green and full, fences mended, barns stocked, the house expanded by a new room Jack and Samuel had built with their own hands. Eliza taught 3 neighbor children their letters at the kitchen table in the afternoons, her brow furrowed in the same serious way Clara's did when she was concentrating. The twins had turned 8 and could climb any tree on the property, their laughter ringing through the branches. Daniel, now sturdy and strong, raced the dog, a mutt they'd taken in that spring, across the yard, crowing when he won. Maggie, talking in full sentences and bossing everyone around, dragged a lopsided doll in one hand and a wooden horse Jack had carved in the other. Clara's days were still full of work, but it was no longer the work of barely surviving. It was the work of building. In the evenings, when the sun sank behind the hills and painted the sky in streaks of orange and rose, she and Jack sat on the porch with mugs of coffee gone lukewarm, their shoulders touching, watching their children play and listening to the river's steady song. One such evening, with the air turning crisp and leaves just hinting at gold, Clara touched Jack's arm. "I have something to tell you," she said. His body went still. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she answered, a slow smile curving her lips. "Everything's right. We're going to have a baby. For a heartbeat, he just stared. Then his face broke into a joy so fierce it almost hurt to see. "A baby," he repeated. "Our baby, our baby," she confirmed, laughter bubbling up as he picked her up and spun her once, careful and delighted. "Clara Dalton," he choked, setting her down and cupping her face. "I thought the good things in my life were over, and now you've given me all this and more." The children, who had been not listening from the yard, erupted into chaos. Samuel shouted, "It's got to be a boy. I'm outnumbered." Eliza protested. "Another girl would be perfect. We need more help in the kitchen." The twins demanded twins, of course. Daniel said solemnly, "I just want the baby to be healthy." And Maggie stomped a little foot and declared, "My baby," as if that settled the matter. As the sky darkened and fireflies began to wink into existence over the tall grass, Clara leaned back against Jack's chest, his arms wrapped around her and their growing child. The 6 children darted through the yard after the dog. The chickens clucked softly as they settled on their roosts, and the house behind them glowed warm with lamplight. She thought back to the night she'd had $3 and no hope, to the knock on the door and the stranger with sad eyes and a wagon. "Hard to believe it started with 5 words," she murmured. "Come with me. All of you," Jack finished softly. He pressed a kiss in her hair. "Best words I've ever spoken." And as the stars pricked the sky awake one by one, Clara understood what she'd built here with this once-broken cowboy. Not just safety, not just survival, but a family chosen and cherished, a home that would echo with laughter and love long after the hard years were only stories told by firelight.